I'm saying it's a bad idea.
The banquet or the fact that it's being held in complete darkness?
Well, obviously, I'm not against banquets. I do work in a hotel.
This dinner is in honor of a very special guest who is both blind and deaf, which is why we've invited blind and deaf guests, as well as charitable donors.
Exactly. Mixing the rich with the poor, with the lights out, and a constituency specially skilled for such circumstance. The opportunity for theft is obvious. As a fellow detective, you must appreciate my position.
I believe I'm more concerned with the potential for mishap than avarice, Mr. Fellows. But I'm not unconcerned.
Why does our hotel need a detective?
I believe you and I living here may have had something to do with that.
Still, one detective per hotel should be sufficient.
Doctor, detective, wonderful to see you again.
Mr. Bell, it is indeed a pleasure.
Mr. Bell?
Allow me to introduce my wife, Mabel.
Hello. How do you do?
And it gives me great pleasure to introduce the guests of honor this evening, Miss Helen Keller and her governess, Mrs. Anne Sullivan Macy, Dr. Julia Ogden, and Detective William Μέρντοχ.
I'm so happy to finally meet you.
I feel I know you already from our letters. This is Dr. Ogden and William Μέρντοχ.
How wonderful to meet you.
And thank you for helping organize this dinner.
Where everyone will be as blind as I am. May I see you?
She wants to touch your face.
Oh, of course.
You're smiling.
I understand you can read lips.
I can. But I make mistakes.
Meet my husband.
And you are very handsome.
Fascinating. Your fingers can see as well as hear. Quite accurately, I might add.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you would please take your assigned seats, dinner is about to be served. And you sit, my dear.
I think it would suit everyone if you were to take your leave, sir.
I beg your pardon?
To find you here in present company is an insult.
At least I've paid to be here.
You either leave, or I'll be forced to do something I may regret.
Come and take your seat.
What's the matter?
Missing my steak knife and my napkin.
Well, you could just borrow mine.
Don't be tedious.
Goodness, I'm missing my napkin too. However, will I dab my mouth?
Excuse me. Hello, waiter. We're missing a knife and 2 napkins.
Ladies and gentlemen, you should all have your meals in front of you by now. Please take a moment to acquaint yourself with everything you will be needing. Please remember, this is an experiment in experience. And whilst it's always preferable for the sightless to have sight, sometimes it helps for the sighted to have insight.
Oh, my. William, are you still there?
No, I seem to have completely disappeared.
This darkness is quite extraordinary. I so rarely experience.
Tell me about your latest rose.
Well, as you know, I've been committed to hybrid tea since I decided to become a Rosarian. And I've been working on developing a cross between
Success. This is quite exciting.
I have particularly high hopes for one that I'm going to call Crimson Sunrise because there's just a hint of red.
Sunrises are yellow. Sunsets are red.
Excuse me.
Yes, but
Sir! Oh my God! Turn on the lights! Turn on the lights!
Goodness gracious! What can be? Say, who could have done this?
Everybody away from the table. I mean now. This means you. Sir!
This gentleman is deaf. Allow me.
The killer likely covered his mouth with this napkin and then used the countervailing force to push in the knife.
Any idea of the force that would have been required?
Well, a woman could have done it, if that's what you're asking.
Didn't I tell you something like this would happen?
I don't recall you mentioning anything about murder.
A crime of opportunity was what I predicted.
Detective, if I may be of any assistance.
Yes, I would be grateful if you could aid in the questioning of the deaf guests. The constables will be
Why
arriving
are you
in-
wasting time with the deaf? The blind is who you should focus on. Who else could find someone in the pitch dark, let alone kill them?
We have guests that are both blind and deaf.
Yes, Helen Keller. She has the skills, no doubt about it, but the killer instinct?
Mr. Fellows, if you don't mind, I have an investigation.
Of course. I'm just the hotel detective, after all.
Is there anything you'll be requiring of us, Detective? I'd like to take Helen back to her room.
Very well, but stay there. I will need to interview both of you.
I do have some information you may find pertinent.
What would that be?
I overheard some guests complaining about a missing knife. And 2 napkins, if I recall. It's probably nothing. Sorry to waste your time.
George, Henry, please interview all of the guests and get a copy of the seating chart, please.
Sir, I take it dinner did not go as planned?
No, it did not. Oh, and please find out which guests were missing a knife and 2 napkins.
Sir.
The killer inserted the knife into the narrow gap between the spine and the skull. He or she knew to slide the weapon in sideways.
Detective Murdoch, it may interest you to know that I made an audio recording of the dinner. 2, in fact.
Oh.
I was hoping to learn whether the lack of visual reference would affect the way we speak. I gather you'd like a listen.
Yes, I would.
So is this your right shoulder or your left?
George, I found out who reported the knife and napkins missing.
Ruth Newsom.
And the man she's with.
Right. Do you want me to interview them? I know she's a bit spoony over you.
It's okay. I can manage it. Miss Newsom?
Constable Higgins! Oh, isn't it dreadful? Have you determined who did it?
Not yet, I'm afraid.
This is my fiancé, Herbert Wilson.
Your fiancé? Congratulations.
Yes, we're overjoyed.
So overjoyed.
I understand you were missing your knife.
Oh, and our napkins.
And when did you notice them missing?
As I sat down, I had the matter rectified immediately. That kind of sloppiness is an embarrassment.
Herbie is one of the organizers.
Yes, I believe in returning to those in need a small portion of my good fortune. It's a simple credo, but one to which I am committed.
Well, as you know, I've been committed to hybrid tea since I decided to become a Rosarian. And I've been working on developing a cross between Persiana, which is Persian in origin, and some of the more robust varieties found here in Canada. I have particularly...
Bloody hell, she gone off rat long.
I heard footsteps.
Yes.
Could it be the waiter?
No, all of the waiters were out of the room at the time the lights went out. Could you play it back again?
Why don't you tell me about your latest, Rose?
Well, as you know, I've been committed to hybrid tea since I decided to become a...
There it is. I heard it.
Let it continue.
Why don't you tell me about your latest, Rose?
Well, as you know, I've been committed to hybrid tea since I decided to become a Rosarian. And I've been working on developing a cross between Persiana, which is Persian in origin, and some of the more robust varieties found in Canada. I have to get to the high levels for what called critical sunrise, because it's just a hint of red.
Sunrises are yellow, sunsets are red.
4 steps, a pause, and then 4 more steps. As if the killer took 4 steps to reach the victim, and then 4 more to return to his seat.
And the distance would depend on stride length, which is variable.
Between 2 and 3 feet.
Roughly the distance between one diner and the next.
Our victim, David Thornton, was seated at the middle of the table.
And 4 steps brings us to either end.
So the killer was on the right side of the table.
We know that Anne Sullivan Macy was at that end.
And Helen was to her left at the head.
Who's at the other end?
George and Henry will have that information. What have you, gentlemen?
Sir, a couple of points of interest. A blind man by the name of William Dawes was seen getting into a verbal spat with the victim just before the lights were turned on.
A blind man would be more capable than most.
And 3 people report being touched lightly on the right shoulder while the lights were out.
Where were they sitting?
Seats R5 through R7.
It's how the killer found his victim.
Well, as you know, I have been committed to hybrid teas since I decided to become a Rosarian, and I've been working on developing this cross between Persiana, which is Persian in origin, and some of the more robust varieties found here in Canada. And I have particularly high hopes for one that I'm going to call Crimson Sunrise, because there is just this.
George, who was sat here?
R8. That would be William Dawes, the blind man.
Bring him in.
Threaten him? When did I threaten him?
Witnesses reported an incident shortly before supper began.
I didn't mean kill him.
What did you mean?
Give him a good rap on the skull. And I wouldn't have regretted it. I was only saying that to be civil.
What exactly did Mr. Thornton do to you?
To me, nothing. It was Miss Keller he insulted.
How so?
She has surmounted the greatest obstacles a person can face, and this moral wastrel has the temerity to call her a fraud.
Why is he marrying her? Why is who marrying whom? Herbert Wilson and Ruth Newsom. What do you care? It just seems an odd pairing.
She's rich, he's rich.
Exactly. What's in it for him?
Well, is the blind man our killer?
Motive seems a bit thin. Also, the victim wrote a weekly column entitled The Inquiring Skeptic.
I read that. He exposed shams and whatnot.
Though even I thought the piece he wrote on Helen Keller was a bit much.
What did he write about her?
He criticized her for writing about things she couldn't possibly know about, like clouds. Which I think is unfair. I've never seen God, but I know what he looks like.
Really?
Of course, big white beard, heavy eyebrows, never smiles.
Bald?
Bald? Oh, I wouldn't think so, Higgins. If you were the supreme being of the universe, would you choose to walk around with a naked pate?
Crabtree, enough. A man who wrote a crusading column exposing cheaters may have angered more than admirers of Helen Keller.
Right, well, I'll look into it.
Henry, come with me. This is Mr. Bell's graphizer. Do you know what it does?
It graphizes.
Yes. More specifically, it creates a graphic representation of an audio recording.
Exactly.
What I want you to do is to transcribe everything that you hear and identify where each sound falls on this graph. Do you understand?
Yes.
When a person speaks, make a mark for the duration of that speech, like this. Dr. Ogden.
William, are you still there?
Lift.
Oh, I seem to have completely disappeared. This is quite
Replace.
extraordinary. I so rarely experience it. Yes?
Lift. And so on. On each line, write exactly what was said. At the end, roll it back and repeat for each voice that you hear.
Sir, how will I know who's speaking?
We'll get to that later. All right.
Detective Murdoch, my wife has some information you may want to hear.
Please come in. Sit down.
Mabel is an excellent lip reader, but you'll have to face her squarely.
You were seated next to the victim, were you not?
That is correct.
What information do you have for me, Mrs. Bell?
I believe I may have overheard a message
A message?
in Morse code.
How do you mean you overheard it?
She heard it with her fingertips, like this.
Do you feel that?
Barely.
It's very slight, but a deaf person would notice it. It's how I get my dear Mabel's attention.
Oh. When was this message sent?
Just before the murder.
And what was the message?
I don't know Morse code well enough to say.
I have particularly high hopes for one that I'm going to call Crimson Sunrise because it's just a hint of red.
Sunrises are yellow, sunsets are red.
You can hear the disdain in his voice.
You're right. But he seemed genuinely curious about the roses. If you're so put out by it, Higgins, I don't know why you don't ask her to marry you.
Don't be ridiculous.
Well, I'm serious. She would take you any day over Mr. Moneybags.
George, she's bonkers. And if you haven't noticed a little dim...
You're no Newton yourself, Higgins. Apple fell on his head, broke the laws of motion.
I don't want her, all right? I just... When someone likes you, you don't want to see them hurt.
Thank you, Henry.
Since I decided to become a Rosarian, and I've been working on developing...
I didn't hear anything.
Neither did I. But the energy of the vibrations is most likely expended in the frequencies below our hearing. Now, the lowest frequency I've isolated is 20 oscillations per second. That's this line here.
That's a lot of noise we didn't hear.
So how do we isolate the thumps?
Field compression. Long and short salients.
Dots and dashes.
I see an N.
Mostly numbers, as far as I can tell.
I'll write them down.
1, 0, 1, 5, and there's your N. 7, 1, 5.
What's all this then?
Some sort of coded message, sir.
Who sent it?
We don't know.
Nor do we know for whom it was intended. What if one of those numbers was a time?
10, 15, 7, 15, or 10:15 in 7:15, room 715. The sender was setting up a meeting.
What time is it now?
10 minutes after 10.
Better get a move on.
Police, open the door. I hear movement.
Break in.
So what's this here, then? Are you breaking into one of our private rooms?
Excuse me, this is a police matter.
Oh, it's a police matter, is it? So those upholding the law feel it's theirs to break?
Who are you?
Sir, this is Ralph Fellows, the hotel detective.
Not a real detective like you, of course. No, we hotel detectives have to follow the law.
Who's staying in this room?
I'm sorry. You seem to have mistaken me for the desk clerk.
Bloody hell, is that?
Miss Keller.
David?
As in David Thornton?
The victim?
No. No. David, what is David?
He wrote a column suggesting I was a fraud. I challenged him to come and see me for himself in person.
So you met him?
At Radcliffe. I was feeling very stern, and I intended to prove what I could see with my senses. But when I touched his face and felt the words coming out of his mouth, he was so funny and charming. I know a woman like myself oughtn't to have such feelings. At least my parents thought so. And Mrs. Sullivan Macy. Over time, my feelings grew. I kept it to myself. But when he told me he felt the same, it all came tumbling out. We kept it a secret, but our desire was so strong, we agreed to marry the next time we met. When I got his message, I knew he was coming for me. My heart is broken, and
I'm ashamed.
Dear girl, my wife is deaf, but if she were blind, I would love her no less.
I have a question.
Put her hand to your lips and then speak.
Had Mrs. Sullivan Macy ever met Mr. Thornton?
Yes, at Radcliffe.
Then why did she not tell you he'd been killed?
She knew about David. She didn't so.
I would have told her in time.
Better she suffer a broken heart first, thinking that her lover had changed his mind.
She would have come to know it sooner or later from that man.
Why do you say that?
He would have exploited her.
How do you know?
Love is a transaction, Detective. What is being exchanged here? Add to that the rightful discomfort people would feel about such a union. Romance is not in the cards for Helen, and the sooner she comes to accept that fact, the better off she will be.
Did you know she and Mr. Thornton intended to elope?
I didn't know it had gotten that far. I knew she was in love with him. I know they met in New Orleans.
Did you know he was going to be at the banquet?
No, that was a surprise.
What did you intend to do?
I don't know. As it turned out, fate intervened.
Did it? Or did you kill him?
Don't be absurd.
You thought David Thornton represented a threat, danger, heartbreak, possibly worse? Wouldn't you do anything to protect her?
Not that.
Convince me.
I was in my seat the entire time.
Can anyone vouch for that?
Helen.
Somebody's in.
Come in.
I've come to take Helen back to her room. Oh dear, I was afraid this would happen.
How could you not tell me?
How can I explain if you won't listen?
I'll see Helen back to her room. Give her anger time. She still needs you.
I'm sorry.
Just go!
It's all right. She's gone now.
Thank you for your time, gentlemen. If you could take the seats here at the end of the table. All right.
What's going on here?
This is part of our ongoing investigation, Mr. Fellows.
And it's your duty to inform me of any police business pertaining to this hotel. You don't have to respect me, Detective, but I insist that you respect the office I represent.
Actually, Detective, I could use your assistance at this moment.
Assistance?
We need somebody to play the role of the victim.
Are you being funny?
No. Please, have a seat.
All right. Oh, reenacting the crime, are we? That never hurts. I've done it myself on occasion.
Mr. Bell, if you'd be so kind.
Oh, I see. You're thinking it's Anne Sullivan Macy. I considered her.
That's 8 steps.
How did she get all the way back without us hearing?
Could she have walked on the carpet?
Not enough room.
She took off her shoes.
Would she think to do so? Did she know the banquet was being recorded?
Never told anyone.
Detective?
What have you, George?
I've been reading through some of Mr. Thornton's articles. I found one of particular interest. Apparently, a well-respected professor believed that one of his students stumbled upon a means of communicating with the dead. Now, they had demonstrations and people came from all over and they would ask questions into this device and the dead would respond. It was a great sensation. They were even awarded a patent.
I remember reading about this.
That's right. But then, Mr. Thornton here discovers that the device is nothing more than a version of Fessenden's wireless voice transmitter. The student, of course, was a confidence trickster, and he'd conned everybody, including the professor. He was just using his reputation to sell the patent.
George, what does this have to do with our case?
Sir, the professor was Horace Carmody.
And he was seated here next to William Dawes. Mr. Bell, if you could replay the recording.
As you know, I've become committed to hybrid teas ever since I decided to become a Rosarian. And I've actually been working on a cross between Persiana, which is Persian in origin, and some of the more robust Canadian varieties found here. And I'm especially excited about one that I think I'll call Crimson Sunrise because it has just a hint of red.
George, bring in Horace Carmody.
Sir.
You think I killed him? Are you forgetting the killer touched me on the shoulder?
Of course you'd say that. If you weren't touched, that would mean you were the killer.
Did you know who David Thornton was?
Yes, I knew who he was.
Of course you did. It was his column that exposed your device as a fraud.
I know what you're thinking. But the truth is, I've never blamed Mr. Thornton for what happened.
But he ruined your reputation.
Of course he didn't. A student who preyed on my naivete destroyed my reputation. Mr. Thornton was simply reporting the facts.
It's got to be him.
I agree, he is a strong suspect. But I'm troubled by the very evidence that we're relying on.
Why's that?
Well, sir, if it was Mr. Carmody, why touch a series of people on the shoulder knowing that it would lead to him being a suspect?
So you think that someone else killed Thornton and then set it up to look like it was Carmody?
Possibly. Mr. Bell, you made separate recordings from either end of the table, correct?
Yes.
What if we were to synchronize those and play them back simultaneously, one in each ear?
Like a stereoscope. Only with sound.
We might be able to determine which direction the footsteps came from.
Yes, by Jove.
Sir, I've got a theory.
All right, Henry, let's have it.
As you know, sir, Ruth Newsom is engaged to Herbert Wilson. It's clearly a mismatch, sir. So I did some investigating, and it appears that he has recently suffered a reversal of fortune, sir.
And?
Well, sir, it suggests that he is only marrying her because he wants her money.
Henry, what does this have to do with the murder?
Well, I don't know, sir, but it certainly seems suspicious.
Henry, Ruth Newsom and Herbert Wilson were seated on the left side of the table. And we know from the number of footsteps the killer was seated on the right.
If you say so, sir.
Henry, is it possible your interest in this is personal?
I just think he's up to no good.
All right. Seem to have synchronized the sound recordings. So now we should be able to tell from which direction the sounds are coming. How strange.
The footsteps seem to begin in the middle.
And then go to the one side and then double back to the other side.
Before returning to the middle again.
So the killer was sitting in the middle next to the victim?
That's where my wife was sitting.
Oh. So who's the lady on the other side?
Ernestine Wallace. But I believe she was engaged in a conversation with her husband at the time of the murder.
So nobody could have done it then? Well, good. That'll save us a bit of work.
Shall we have another listen?
No. We're not listening anymore. I want everyone back in the banquet room. May I have your attention? Thank you all for coming. I realize this may seem unusual.
Detective, what are we doing here?
Oh, are you going to reveal the murderer? It's such a thrill to see a real detective at work.
Henry, could you please take Mr. Thornton's position?
Oh, a reenactment of the events. How exciting. But something is missing. Yes, your wife.
My wife may be many things, but I can say with assurance that she is not a killer.
Unlike the rest of us, of course, worthy of your suspicion.
I'm going to play you a recording of last night's dinner. And as you listen, I would ask that you close your eyes and do exactly what you were doing last night. Mr. Bell?
Why don't you tell me about your latest drugs?
Well, as you know, I have been committed to hybrid teas since I decided to become a resident. And I've been working with this
Learn to feel the
Frisiana, which is Persian.
Music's a beautiful thing.
Boston varieties. I have particularly high hopes for what I'm going to call the crimson flavors, because there is just
What was that? I don't know.
Well, I must say I am breathless with anticipation. So what have you learned, detective?
Mrs. Bell, you say you detected a communication between Mr. Thornton and Miss Keller just prior to the footsteps being heard. And that constitutes your alibi, does it not?
That is right.
In fact, the message occurred seconds before the killer's footsteps could be heard.
What's your point, detective?
The footsteps began at the center of the table.
You're not suggesting that...
Your wife is the only person whose actions cannot be heard on that recording.
It cannot be her, sir.
What is happening?
What you don't know, detective, is that the illness that stole my wife's hearing also destroyed her sense of balance. If she walks without visual reference, she will fall over.
So what's your theory now, detective?
It was not Mabel.
Why do you say that?
Because the killer walked behind me.
I'm afraid that's impossible.
This is too good.
If Miss Keller says a man walked behind her, you can be assured she is telling the truth.
George, if you would. Miss Keller, could you please tell us when you feel someone walking behind you?
Yeah.
So, now what is your theory, Detective?
I've concluded that the killer was never sitting at the table at all. The killer was standing the entire time.
You think I did it?
You knew the dinner was being recorded. Once the lights went out, you walked slowly, softly, to the edge of the carpet and behind Miss Keller. Not knowing that she would sense your presence, you then proceeded...
This is absurd.
Can you prove it didn't happen that way?
No, but...
Then be quiet, please, and let me do my job. In answer to your question, I believe the killer did come from the opposite side of the table.
Sir, I thought that was impossible.
We thought that was impossible because we only heard 8 footsteps. It would be impossible for someone to circumnavigate a table of this size in 8 footsteps. And how could the killer travel such a great distance in complete darkness? Unless the killer used the edge of the carpet to navigate. The killer took 8 footsteps. But we only heard 4. At the end of those 8 steps, the killer struck. The killer then took another 8 steps to return to his seat, but not before touching these 3 people on the shoulder in order to set up Mr. Carmody for the crime, which was your intent all along, wasn't it?
Are you saying I'm the killer?
Oh, no, that's impossible. We were having a conversation.
Begging your pardon, Miss Newsom, but you were having a conversation. A conversation that was initiated by Mr. Wilson, but one that he only participated in after the last of the killer's footsteps were heard.
No, but
Miss Newsom, has your fiancé ever expressed an interest in your roses?
Oh, no. He finds it all terribly boring. He calls it my, blah, blah, blah.
Blah, 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 indeed.
Well, this is ridiculous. How would I have found him in complete darkness?
Practice, Mr. Wilson. After all, you helped to organize this dinner, did you not? You had access to this very table every night for the past week.
And why would I kill a man I've never met?
That's a good question. I believe the answer lies in your recent engagement.
What about our engagement?
Mr. Wilson, why are you marrying Miss Newsom?
Because I love her.
What specifically do you love about her?
Well, her beauty, of course, and her
money?
I have my own money.
You had money, Mr. Wilson. You've since lost it all.
Is that true?
And you've gone to great lengths to set up Mr. Carmody for a crime. Why would you do that? Could it be that you've lost all of your money investing in a machine that allows the dead to talk? Mr. Carmody, who are your investors?
I don't know offhand.
No matter. Easy enough to find out. Henry, could you dig a little deeper into Mr. Wilson's finances?
Gladly, sir.
Miss Keller?
All right, you got me. It's over. I'm not sorry. He got what he deserved. As would have you. I lost a fortune because you were too stupid to see the truth. And as for you, I hate roses. And I would frankly rather go to the noose than be married to someone as boring and vacuous as you.
Oh, no. Well, Detective Murdoch, once again, our partnership has produced results.
Indeed, and once again, I must say thank you for your help.
Perhaps we could develop this stereoscopic sound you've invented.
Oh, I don't see there being much use for it. Except, of course, in solving crime.
Maybe so. But if you'd ever like to work together again, just say the word.
I'll give you a hand.
I wonder if she'll ever forgive me.
Of course she will. It wasn't you that broke her heart. She needs some time to learn to trust you again. I'll fetch her. Your carriage is here. Don't forget what I told you the other night. Don't let one man's barbarity keep you from embracing everything that life has to offer.
No, I won't. No, I doubt I'll ever love again.
You surprise the world with your strength and resilience. You may yet surprise yourself.
I'm right here, Helen. The leg. Thank you.
Remarkable woman.
We can go.
To live in a world without sight and sound, all of your other senses would have to be heightened. Taste, touch, everything would be magnified. Did you feel that at dinner?
Yes, I did.
Well, that's good.
Why do you say that?
Because I bought us a blindfold. And I have an idea for a little experiment.
Oh, my.